This is Eye on Health on Dubai Eye 103.8
with MedLab Middle East.
Fantastic to have you with us on Eye on Health here on Dubai Eye 103.8. I'm Helen Farmer. It's brought to you by Arab Health and MedLab Middle East. And we're talking about that mind-gut connection. So much work being done in this space, and we're speaking to some of the best brains on it. Joining us now is Dr. Ebaa Alozairi, the Chief Medical Officer and Consultant on Endocrinology and Nutrition at Dasman Diabetes Institute in Kuwait. Doctor, thank you so much for your time. I feel like this is such an interesting area, and one that, yes, the medical field is paying more attention to, but also us as, the general public, looking at optimizing how we feel, looking at prevention and some little tweaks and changes that perhaps we can make to make that area a little bit happier in 2024. Would you mind explaining your philosophy, I guess, if you will, your definition of that mind-gut connection?
So when we say about the gut microbiota connections, it's really a complex connections. We look at the enteronephric, systems in the gut as a very complex neuronal network, to the extent that we think of the gut as, the second brain in your body. I think there is a lot of, hype nowadays of, which is the best, eating patterns and how do we feed our brain better. But let's, look things down and really pinpoint to the scientific evidence and where we are today. So just to, make it very simple, when we say, what is the microbiota? So these are the living organisms that lives in the gut. And then we want to differentiate it to the microbiomes, which are the gene functions. So these are collections of gene functions that, control this. And there's a lot of this talking between the gut and the brain that we're thinking, how much is it really modulating? And how much does it take into health and disease? And can you really feed your gut to improve your brain health? And that's where is the major actions looking into.
And do you think you can?
Well, looking down at the lens nutrition, we really need to highlight, the methodological limitation today that we have in our studies. So most of the studies that they come are from the preclinical studies. When we look into human studies, there are few human studies, but as you know, for us, to be a gold standard, these has to be a randomized control studies. So when we look at meta-analysis and recent, randomized controlled trials, we see this is an emerging field, but it's still within its limitation. The gut-brain is a bi-directional relationship, and most of the studies has been done in the preclinical studies. But we know there are certain factors that really induce this, inflammation pathway. And this inflammation pathway, what is really causing today a lot of the diseases that we're seeing, similar to the depression, metabolic diseases, and obesity. And it's always been, which came first? Is it, the obesity-inducing inflammation? Is it the depression-inducing the inflammation? Or is it the inflammation causing the depression? So which is the chicken and which is the egg? And that is still, unanswered questions, really, when we're looking into the clinical trials and evidence-based medicine.
Dr. Ebaa, we've been talking to experts today about the importance of good nutrition on the gut and then ultimately that connection. But is food the only way to create a healthy gut? Are some people just blessed with a great digestive system and, much like, someone might take for granted having, good eyesight or good hair?
So honestly, this is a new emerging area. So we really need to pinpoint down to the clinical evidence medicine and how we can really improve this bi-directional relationship. But we know, from old studies and from also randomized controlled trials, is the dietary fibers are really essential. And we see these are lacking nowadays from our food, especially in the Gulf area. We used to have a lot of the greens and the fibers as part of the main, eating patterns and eating plans. A lot of people refer to diet, and we're away now from the word diet. And I'm very pleased to see that you're always referring it to nutrition because we're taking it into now, what is your eating patterns and what is your eating plans? But as I said, the microbiomes are a collection of genes, and these genes are inherited. Can I induce the changes within my body and then induce, the good bacteria, and these are the microbiota living with high strains within your body. That is where the, major clinical trials and the evidence-based is still lacking there.
I think it's because as a population, we like the idea of a quick fix. Kind of forget that actually it's not often a one size fits all. We're so individual because of the factors you're talking about there, the genetic, some of the lifestyle or environmental factors as well. To come back to food though, if you don't mind, Doctor, what are some of your go-tos, whether it's in your cupboard or your fridge or things that you would love everyone to be eating more of? I guess you're kind of your superheroes.
So, I would definitely focus today, and because we're speaking about the gut, brain axis, so we really want to look back into the evidence. So we have a high evidence for the Mediterranean food, and this has been shown in clinical trials. The first clinical trial that was done is the SMILE trial, and that's, on a group of people with mental health disorders, and just to see if the Mediterranean diet can actually improve things and get things, into control. So these are, one of the things that we can look into it. The other, things that are being emerging is the fermented, food, looking at yogurt, looking at kombucha, looking at kefir, and can they really, have enriched, obtained from the microbial, enzymatic conversions. And in the randomized control trials in healthy individuals, it has been shown that fermented food really can lead to increased microbe diversity. However, we don't know the real link, to improvement in mental health. We know that it improves your mood, it can improve your cognition, but whether it has an improvement in mental health. So these are things that probably we need to add into our nutrition plan. And these are the things that have always been part of our culture. So Mediterranean diet, stems from the Mediterranean food, has a lot of evidence for cardiovascular disease, for mental health, for diabetes. So, and then, looking at the fermented diet. Now, the other thing we look into intermittent fasting. Now, this is the hype now.
It's a big hype. There's books, there's influencers. Who do you think it suits?
To be honest, it's various methods. So we have the time restricted feeding, where we say you're not supposed to eat for 18 hours and you can eat within 6 hours window. People have gone even to 20 hours versus 4 hours. And we have seen that there's no increased benefit at all. So if you go beyond 18 hours, you wouldn't get any extra benefit in any, any matters, whether it's insulin secretions or whether it is, mental health or mood. I think people, just go and experiment these things, but now looking down into randomized control trial. And the other thing is that, the 5-2. Many people do 5-2, where 5 days they fast and the 2 days they feast. So it's the other way. So, and then if we look down into it, it's again coming from this Arab cultures where we have a lot of people fasting Mondays and Thursdays. And most of the evidence from the intermittent fasting also comes from Ramadan fasting as well. So, or people, various diversity culture group do fasting within their spiritual, and these fasting really have, can modulate the abundance of the butyric acid, and that's part of the, the gut-brain axis as well. So there is some evidence for the intermittent fasting. There is some evidence for Mediterranean, eating plans, and there is some evidence for the fermented food. However, most of these evidence are in small human, clinical trials, and there is not standardized methods yet. So these trials are short trials and not really standardized.
As you say, a big commercial push and selling a few books and saying it's the cure-all for everybody's obesity problems. What about as we get older, Dr. Ebaa? Are there things that we should be adjusting, reducing, increasing, that maybe our gut becomes, less tolerant to as we get older?
So this is really, interesting. So what we know when we get older, of course, we're losing a lot of the muscle mass. And we in Dasman Diabetes Institute, focusing on the research around the region, and this is an institute that produces 100 papers per year, single institute. We have looked at our data and compared to the UK, biobank, and we have seen that our people really have a much less muscle mass and the Arab region compare, to the UK Biobank. So we're already, at a low muscle mass that increases your frailty risk, increases your, osteoporosis risk. So when you're looking into what methods, we definitely need increased protein intake, and we really need to increase the resistance exercise and the resistant bands exercise. Many people probably not used to the resistant bands and the weights in this part of the region and think if I just walk, it will do it all. Walking is really useful, and we advocate for people to walk, but we need to increase methods of, increasing the muscle mass within your body. So you would have further. And as we get older, as you said, our gut is not the same function. So you would see a lot of people losing nutrients. And when you see them clinically, they're more exposed to anemia, more exposed to lower B12. And that's why it's really important as an elderly population that you would always check your iron stores, you would check your B12 stores, and then look into both nutritional and supplementations if needed to increase these, as well.
You mentioned supplementation there. Is there anything that you do recommend?
Food is your best medicine. So, supplement everything through your food. The more colorful is your plate, the more higher antioxidants, the more higher phenols, and, you would drive a lot of the benefits within your body. So these are essential things that we really need to look into it. Avoid, what we're having a lot of the Western diets that, inducing a lot of the inflammation. High saturated food, refined carbohydrates, depending a lot on, rice and breads and potatoes and pastas and sugars and sweets and things. And that's what's really driving a lot of the diseases, because it secretes, the inflammatory pathway, especially inducing the interleukin 6 pathway in your body, causing the inflammation. And that's what is really driving mental health, obesity, diabetes, and people probably undermining the effect of the inflammation on your body and how it's really connected to your diseases.
I wanted to ask you about what might be happening behind the scenes, with research, with studies, that maybe some advancements, over the years that you're particularly excited about, that, we as a general population might not see for some time. What's been happening in this gut space in particular?
I think we live in, in the most exciting time really today, and things in medicine and nutrition really, moving really fast, focusing more into clinical trials, really needing to standardize the methods that we do things and integrating it into digital platforms. Because today we know without technology and digital platforms, we will not be able to move things. So what is the main lacking, even when you want to look down to microbiota, you really need to target your mood, behavioral functions, your dietary intake, your brain functions, all at the same time. And you will not be able to do so if we're not going to use the technology and, the digital apps. And we're lucky today because most of us walked, with our digital apps and we're glued to it, but probably it's causing us more diseases than benefit because we are inducing it as a human rather than utilizing these gadgets to our advantages.
What would you love everyone listening today to be doing, changing?
Walk more, focus on your sleep, really invest in your food, and then look at your stress level and how can I decrease my stress level.
Dr. Ebaa Alozairi, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time and your insights, and wishing you a very happy and healthy 2024. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Ebaa Alozairi, Chief Medical Officer and Consultant in Endocrinology and Nutrition at the Dasman Diabetes Institute in Kuwait. Thank you so much for your time, and make sure you tune in next week for more in-depth conversations on health, brought to you by Arab Health and MedLab Middle East.
You're listening to Eye on Health on Dubai Eye 103.8.
With MedLab Middle East, powering medical laboratory growth in the Middle East and beyond. Find out more on medlabme.com.